Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to The Truth. Well, today we're going to preview a little bit of this week's football games and some college rankings with my reaction. Going into the start of the week, we have Oklahoma versus Texas. That should ideally be a good game. Ideally, crossing my fingers. It's literally one of the first games in the morning at 11 Central Time, depending on where you're watching. That could be a really good game to watch. I am a little skittish on Oklahoma, but what's going for them is Texas does play a little inconsistent sometimes. So this could be a really good game, really close game to watch, really exciting one, especially start off your day for college football. Going to Maryland versus Ohio, I feel like that one's probably going to be a blowout, so I wouldn't really mark that down for your game to really watch. Another one which I could potentially be a blowout is LSU versus Missouri. I know they're both ranked in the top 25, but LSU's offense is really high powered, and they can run, they can pass, they can do whatever. Now that defense is a little questionable, but I don't know if Missouri can hang with them to keep up with that high scoring offense. But I do like, if you were a betting man, I do like that over under. Washington State versus UCLA. I'm not too sure about this game. I've been kind of going back and forth. It could be a close game. It couldn't be. The same way I feel about with the next game, with one of the next games, Alabama versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M is 4-1, but Alabama, like Texas, playing a little inconsistent. But if Texas and Alabama can put together two really good wins, it'll bring a little consistency to me and give me some faith that they can really make a push this year. Virginia Tech versus Florida State. Florida State's surprisingly, even though they're ranked 5th in the nation, they're surprisingly throwing up a lot of close games. I wouldn't say they're necessarily on upset alert, but against a 2-3 team, I wouldn't be surprised if at first it was close and then Florida State just put it away. Syracuse versus North Carolina. It's another game I don't expect to be close. Kentucky versus Georgia. I expect this game to be close in the first half, just because Georgia has consistently not put teams away in the first half. And that's what scares me about Georgia, is the fact that they're playing a lot like how LSU played last year, to where, like, yeah, teams might get ahead or they might fight, but that second half they can win. It's just when teams, really beat and really score a lot of points in the first half, you might not be able to catch up. So I'd watch out for Georgia. I don't know if I feel about them being number one right now, but I feel like at the half, it's going to be close, and then after that, Georgia should put it away. Michigan versus Minnesota. I feel like this is another. Michigan does not have 2 hours of a schedule. I feel like this is another game where Michigan's going to blow them out. Notre Dame versus Louisville. That's a game I'd probably have marked on your map for a later game, just because I feel like that's a game that would be close to watch and maybe fun. A lot of big runs I expect. Arkansas versus Ole Miss. That's another game I don't know how I feel about. If Arkansas's offense plays like how they played against LSU, them and Ole Miss are going to put up another high-scoring, fast offense, big play game, which was so much fun to watch last week. Georgia Tech versus Miami. I expect Miami to easily win this. Fresno State versus Wyoming. Wyoming has played surprisingly well. It could be a close game, but that's something to keep in mind. It's another game to circle on your map. Cal versus Oregon State, I don't know necessarily. And then USC versus Arizona, I don't know necessarily, just because I feel like USC is starting to really put together some good runs. Like Caleb Williams already has 21 touchdowns, which is insane to think. But yeah, just recapping games I would circle for definitely are probably going to be really good games. Oklahoma versus Texas. Possibly LSU versus Missouri, and possibly Bama versus Texas A&M. Definitely the first half of, I know it sounds ridiculous, but the first half of Georgia versus Kentucky. Definitely Notre Dame and Louisville, and possibly Arkansas, Ole Miss, and then possibly Fresno State and Wyoming. Those are my games that could be close, could be really interesting going into this week of college football. So if you have time or you want to tune in, I'd probably see what the score is at and tune into those games. Now going into the excuse me, going into the reactions for the rankings, I'm gonna do both polls like I did last time. Um, both of them have Georgia at number one. Going back with what I said before is I don't know if Georgia can really. I can confidently say Georgia can be number one. I don't know if I can. If I'm being really honest, I don't know if I can call any of these teams confident number one teams. There's a lot of parity in college football, a lot of great games because of it. But it's just Georgia doesn't play a solid first half enough for me to say, dang, I really like Georgia. I really like the redhead. It's that first half. That second half, they played great. If they could put together whole games like that, I could easily say Georgia should be number one. Michigan at number two, I don't mind it because Michigan is putting away teams. They're just not putting away really tough teams. And I feel like if they put away Ohio State whenever they're later on their schedule, if they do that, I think there's an argument to be made. Michigan should be ranked number one. Texas, little inconsistent with playing. Um, the AP polls have Texas over Ohio State, and then opposite for the coaching polls. I think you can make an argument for either or. Ohio State hasn't been playing terrible. They've been playing. They've had some games, but they've also had some games where it's like, you like to see them do better. But it's the same thing could be said for Texas, so I don't mind them at that 3 or 4 range. Florida State, I understand why Florida State would be ranked fifth right now, even though they're undefeated. Just because they've had a lot of close games lately in conference. No, yeah, it is in conference, but like still, like you'd like to see them put away games. Penn State at number 6. Penn State has been quietly good, really quietly good. Um, it's really interesting to see where they're gonna end up, just because they are Penn State and no one expected them to be having this good of a record this far into the season. Washington at number 7, and then Washington at number 8. I don't mind that. I kind of do like them right behind Penn State, just because we know Washington has a defense. And the same can be said with Oregon, who we're going to get into a little bit later. Now, do I think and Michael Penix Jr. is like dominating this year, like quietly? Like this year's going to be interesting going into the draft with how well these quarterbacks are going to play. Because we could see a lot of teams picking up a quality depth quarterback or a potential starter. But Washington, they've been doing their things. I'd love to do a film study on them, especially with Oregon too, with Bo Nix. They also have a defense and a quietly good offense. And that gets me to USC. USC on the AP polls are ranked 9th. Wow, on the coaching polls they're ranked 7th. I will state this over and over and over again. Caleb Williams is amazing. He's helping this team out. But the problem is that Lincoln Riley's teams don't have a defense. And that's why I don't know if you can put them higher than maybe 7th. It's that defense is just like, okay, but when you play high-scoring offense teams, eventually they're going to get a stop on you, and you're not going to be able to get a stop on them. Notre Dame being ranked ahead of Alabama, and then Alabama being ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I'm not mad at this. I'm not mad at this for one reason. I believe Notre Dame should technically be ranked higher just because they have one more win over Bama. They deserve it more because of that one win. And plus, the game they lost to was Ohio State, and it was a really close one. They really should have won it. So I understand why it's ranked number 10, and I could see why you backed it up. Bama, a little inconsistent this year. They are 4-1. They do have a tough schedule. I want to see how they finish out, but they're a team who could really make some things happen. They could sneak into the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised. Oklahoma at 12 for both polls. That's a team to watch out for. Oklahoma could surprisingly be really, really good. If Texas and Oklahoma can make a statement next year, I feel like it's going to be really good for their SEC recruiting going into that. And then Washington State over North Carolina. I'd probably have North Carolina. I like Drake May. I liked what he did. I want to see more of that team over Washington State. And then, I'm going to be honest, I'd probably have Ole Miss a little bit higher than 16. I'd have them over Oregon State. I like them at 15. Maybe I think they could upset North Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised if some people had them at 13. But Ole Miss is that Ole Miss. I don't know how to feel about them. They have a really high scoring game against LSU. They kind of lose a close one to Bama-ish. I don't know how to feel about them. The SEC is just wild this year. Miami at 17, that one makes sense. Tennessee being ranked 18th. I don't know if Tennessee is as good as their record looks. Like that's one of the teams that are just like not the best looking games, but could probably fight a tough one out. Utah at 18 with Duke. I'm not mad at. My only thing is, I think you have to give the nod to Kentucky and to Missouri over them, just because they're 5-0 and they also play in the SEC. You know, I'd probably have Missouri, Kentucky over Utah and Duke, and then have that in that order. And then I don't know if I'd have Tennessee over LSU. I'd probably have LSU over Tennessee, even though LSU is 3-2. They've had way tougher games than Tennessee. I think Tennessee would struggle. I do think LSU is better than Missouri, but with their record that they have right now, I don't think they deserve to be ranked higher. Fresno State and Louisville, I'm not mad at. Fresno State is 5-0. I mean, and Louisville too. So we're really gonna see who's gonna continue to stay undefeated. Because look, if they stay undefeated, they deserve a spot, just like TCU last year. Every team deserves a spot if they're ranked undefeated, you know? And that's going to be really interesting to see is how many teams are going to start dropping a loss, maybe two, and seeing how these rankings really change up in the next couple of weeks, because it's bound to happen. Like, a lot of these teams who are undefeated aren't going to be undefeated in the next 2 weeks. And then we'll really have a threshed out ranking. Other than that, man, I guess I'll comment on the NFL. We really need to start having a discussion about the health of players and why they're getting so injured this year. I mean, so many players have torn their ACL, their Achilles, or whatever, and they're out for the rest of the season. I think we really need to start having a conversation about what is truly going on. Because yes, part of it is probably turf, but there's probably a lot more that we're not realizing. All right, thanks for watching. If you have any critiques or things you like that I did in this video and you want me to keep doing, let me know. If there's something you really want me to talk about, like a team or a player or whatever, also let me know. Y'all have a great rest of those days, and see y'all next